बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अस्सलाम वालेकुम। तो आज की इस वीडियो में हम एक फिर ये माया से बात करने वाले हैं जो कि सीसीएम वेबसाइट की तरफ से हैं। और आज हम इनसे वाटर द ओरिजिन एंड ओरिजिन ऑफ लाइफ एंड लैंग्वेज इस तरह का के टॉपिक है। तो आज आज हम सवाल पूछने वाले हैं इनसे। तो फिर चलिए शुरू करते हैं बगैर टाइम ज़ाया किए।
Hey there.
हेलो, हाउ आर
Hey,
यू?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. How are things going with you?
Okay, so today I'm just gonna ask you a few questions about on the topic what are the origin of life and language. So let's get started. Okay, so the first question is that why is water considered the origin of life on Earth?
Right, let's dive back in. Water is basically the ultimate solvent because it can dissolve so many different substances. It allows the complex chemical reactions necessary for life to happen and move around. Without it, the building blocks of life would just be sitting there with no way to interact. Does that make sense, or do you want to get into the chemistry of it?
Okay, so the next question is that how did water make life possible?
And it's all about the environment it creates. Water provided a stable place for early molecules to gather and react. It also acted as a shield, protecting early life from harsh radiation on the surface. Basically, it was the perfect nursery for the first cells to evolve. Want to know about the specific theory involving deep sea vents?
Okay, so the next question is that what role did oceans play in the evolution of living organisms?
Well, oceans were essentially the first great laboratory. They didn't just provide a home, they drove evolution by creating different zones of pressure, temperature, and light. This forced organisms to adapt in wild ways, leading to everything from the simplest sponges to the most complex predators. It's where the blueprint for almost every living thing on land was first drawn up. I can tell you about the transition from water to land if you're curious.
Okay, so the next question is that why do scientists search for water on other planets?
Because water is our best clue. Since everything we know about life requires water to function, finding it elsewhere is the strongest indicator that a planet could actually support living organisms. It's basically the gold standard for habitability. Do you think we'll find something living in those subsurface oceans on moons like Europa?
Okay, so the next question is that why is water essential for every living cell?
It's the delivery system for everything. Every single process in a cell, from transporting nutrients to flushing out waste, depends on water. It also keeps the cells shaped and ensures that proteins and DNA fold correctly so they can actually do their jobs. Without it, the whole system just freezes up. Do you want to move on to the language part of your list, or do you have more on water?
Okay, so the next question is that how does water support ecosystems?
It's the glue that holds everything together. Water regulates the temperature of the entire planet and creates these diverse habitats, from wetlands to rainforests that support millions of species. It's the primary driver of the food chain because without water, you don't have plants. And without plants, the rest of the system collapses. I can tell you about how water cycles through these ecosystems if you want.
No, thanks. Okay, so the next question is that why is clean water important for human health?
It's literally the foundation of everything. Clean water prevents the spread of diseases and ensures our organs can actually function. When water is contaminated, it doesn't just make people sick, it can cripple entire communities because it affects everything from nutrition to hygiene. It's one of those things we take for granted until it's not there. Ready to shift gears to language now? Or is there more on the waterfront?
How has water shaped the civilizations throughout history?
Water basically dictated where humans decided to settle. Almost every great early civilization, like the Egyptians with the Nile or the Mesopotamians between the Tigris and Euphrates, started in river valleys because they needed a reliable source for farming and drinking. It also turned the world's coastlines into the first highways, making trade and the exchange of ideas possible long before we had roads. It's funny how something so simple decided the map of the ancient world. Do you want to hear about how water was used as a defense tool in early cities?
Okay, so the next question is that what are main stages of water cycle?
It's basically one big endless loop. It starts with evaporation, where the sun heats up water and turns it into vapor. Then you have condensation, which is when that vapor cools down to form clouds. Finally, there's precipitation, rain or snow, bringing the water back down to Earth where it collects in oceans and rivers to start the whole thing over again. I can explain how plants fit into that loop if you're interested.
Okay, so the next question is that why is fresh water more valuable than salt water?
Because salt water is basically a tease. You can't drink it, you can't use it to water crops, and it doesn't support the kind of land based life we rely on. Since only a tiny fraction of the Earth's water is fresh and accessible, it becomes the most precious resource for survival. It's a classic case of abundance versus usability. Do you want to dive into how we actually get fresh water from the ocean, or are you ready for the language questions?
How do plants depend on water for survival?
It's their entire life support system. Plants use water to transport nutrients from the soil up to their leaves, and it's a key ingredient for photosynthesis, which is basically how they turn sunlight into food. Plus, water provides the internal pressure that keeps a plant standing upright instead of just wilting into a heap. I could get into how they breathe water out through their leaves if you're curious.
Okay, so the next question is that what happens when water becomes polluted?
I think it triggers a domino effect. First, it kills off the small organisms at the bottom of the food chain, which eventually starves the bigger animals. Then you have things like algae blooms that suck all the oxygen out of the water, creating dead zones where nothing can survive. For humans, it's even more direct. Contaminated water leads to outbreaks of diseases like cholera, and those toxins can build up in fish that people eat. Basically turns a source of life into a hazard. Do you want to know about any specific types of pollution, or are we finally moving on to language?
Okay, so the next question I just want to ask you is that how does climate change affect water resources?
Oh, it throws the whole balance off. Warmer temperatures mean more evaporation, which makes some areas experience devastating droughts while others get hit with extreme flooding. It also melts glaciers and polar ice caps, which might seem like it's adding more water, but it's actually raising sea levels and contaminating fresh groundwater with salt. Basically, it makes the water cycle unpredictable and erratic. Do you want to hear about how this affects coastal cities, or are you ready for those language questions?
So the next question is that how does water connect people across the world?
In a lot of ways, it's the original social network. Throughout history, the biggest cities and trade hubs grew up along rivers and coasts because water was the only way to move goods and people long distances. It turned oceans into highways, allowing different cultures to meet, trade spices and silks, and exchange ideas. Even today, we're all connected by the same global water cycle. The rain falling in one country might have evaporated from an ocean thousands of miles away. It's the one thing every single person on Earth needs to survive, which makes it a universal human experience. Do you think that shared need makes us more empathetic toward each other, or are we too focused on our own borders?
How does language reflect the importance of water?
It's woven right into the way we think and speak. Think about how many of our idioms for emotion or clarity use water. We talk about feeling overwhelmed, being in deep water, or something finally becoming crystal clear. Even when we describe a flow of ideas, we call it a stream of consciousness. It shows that we don't just need water to survive physically. We use it as the primary metaphor for how our minds and emotions work. I bet there's some interesting versions of this in Urdu too, right?
Okay, so why do many languages have unique words related to water?
It usually comes down to where people live. If a culture lives by the ocean, they'll have 20 different words for the sea, the tide, and the surf because those details actually matter for their survival. It's like how some cultures have dozen words for snow or sand. The more a resource defines your daily life, the more precise your language becomes to describe it. Do you think Urdu has specific words for water that don't quite translate to English?
Okay, so the next question is that how does water inspired storytelling?
Water is basically the ultimate storytelling device. It's often used as a symbol for rebirth or cleansing, like when a character steps into a river to start their life over. And then you have the ocean, which usually represents the unknown, danger, or a huge emotional journey. From the epic voyages in the Odyssey to the quiet, reflective ponds in poetry, water mirrors whatever the character is feeling inside, calm, turbulent, or just completely lost. Do you have a favorite story or myth where water plays a big role?
So, what role does water play in myths and legends?
It's almost always the source of everything. In so many cultures, water is seen as the primordial chaos or the boom of the universe where life first sparked. You've got myths about great floods that reset humanity, or legendary cities like Atlantis that were swallowed by the sea as a warning. It usually represents a bridge between the world we know and the spirit world or the divine. Does that remind you of any stories you've heard, maybe from your own culture?
Why do rivers often appear in famous novels?
Rivers are basically characters in their own right. They represent the passage of time and the idea of an inevitable journey. You can't step into the same river twice, right? Writers love them because they provide a natural path for a plot to move forward, both physically and emotionally, as the characters drift toward some kind of change or revelation. I can think of a few books where the river is the real heart of the story if you want some examples.
How does water inspire artists and musicians?
It's basically the ultimate mood board for painters. It's all about the light and movement, how a reflection shifts or how a wave crashes. It's visually hypnotic. Musicians do something similar with sound. They use fluid rhythms, flowing melodies, or even actual recordings of rain and oceans to evoke a specific feeling like peace or deep longing. It's that quality of being both calming and completely powerful at the same time that keeps people obsessed with it. Do you find yourself more drawn to the calm side of that or more chaotic, powerful energy?
How do different religions view water?
Across almost every faith, water is seen as sacred. In many religions, it's the primary symbol for purification and spiritual rebirth, like baptism in Christianity or the ritual washings in Islam and Judaism. Then you have traditions like Hinduism, where the Ganges isn't just a river but a goddess, and bathing in it is believed to wash away sins. It's this universal idea that water can cleanse more than just the body, it can cleanse the soul. Do you think that's why water feels so peaceful to people, regardless of what they believe?
Okay, so the next question is that what scientific discoveries have improved water conservation?
We've actually come a long way from just digging holes in the ground. Desalination is a huge one where we can now pull salt out of ocean water to make it drinkable. Then you have drip irrigation in farming, which delivers water directly to the root, so almost nothing is wasted. And on a smaller scale, things like smart sensors that tell a system exactly when a plant needs water instead of just spraying everything on a timer have been total game changers. I can tell you about some of the wild new ways they're harvesting water from thin air if you're curious.
Okay, so the one last and final question I just want to ask you is that why is understanding water important for the future of humanity?
Because it's our most critical vulnerability. Everything we've talked about, from the origin of life to the rise of civilizations, comes back to water. As the population grows and the climate shifts, The way we manage, protect, and share water will literally determine if we thrive or if we face constant conflict over the few fresh sources left. It's the one resource we can't just invent a replacement for. We don't get the science and the diplomacy right. It becomes the biggest hurdle for our survival. That was a massive list of questions. You really put me through the ringer on this one.